Hi, everyone. Welcome to the art lecture series, our last one of fall quarter. I see people are still just coming in now. So we'll get started in a minute with the introductions, but we are really excited to have Dahlia Elsayed and Andrew Demirjian here from New Jersey, where it's like a cold 20 degrees. It's about time. I watch every day I check the weather. like some cuckoo person, and here it's been cold and rainy, and on the East Coast it's been warm, so I'm sort of like, all right, I'm watching. So we've been like 10 to 20 degrees colder than you, and now it's flipping. So I just want to thank all the people that help support the art lecture series. Roel Berman, Dave Crampton, electronic media interns, Julia Ron, and Evergreen for supporting financially our lovely range of artists that from a variety of fields and areas of inquiry. And I want to encourage all of the students, all the participants to join us for the last half hour of the presentation for lively exchange of ideas. There are two ways for you to participate. One is to write in a question through the Q&A like chat, or even better, to raise your blue hand and ask the question. They won't be able to see you, sadly, but it would be great to hear you. So it's just a little bit more of interaction. So I am going to, we have two students from Foundational Studio Projects introducing Dahlia and Andrew. I think we better start with Lindy. Lindy, will you join us? Thank you.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lindy, and I'm introducing Andrew Demirjian. So at the intersection of image, music, and speech, Andrew Demirjian explores the relationships between modes of communication to create unorthodox, multidimensional. The ethereal, otherworldly landscapes he conceives are informed by his literacy in a language that transcends human sibboleth, the computer. From surveillance and motion tracking to programming and mass data, Demirjian invites viewers into a sonic, interactive space of our digital world with installations, poetry, and videos. Where we might view technology and art as completely separate interests with little crossover, Demirjian shows us the ritualistic qualities of tech lend themselves to shape, color, sound, and movement. In studio arts, we've been deconstructing the formal elements of art, and Demirjian is an expert on rhythm. From his works, we see and hear the mastery of harmony in his multimedia collages. In musical terms, he is a master of the remix, a skill best illustrated in his book, Pan-Terrestrial People's Anthem, where he rearranged 195 national anthems into different poems and songs, exploring the intersection of cultures. Lines of separation are a favorite medium, and by the end of the creation, we see that what we thought of as a wall was little more than the collaborative work of Andrew Demirjian and Dahlia Elsayed is best described by their piece, possibly from this year, called Which Yesterday is Tomorrow. This celebration of the past and future is inspired by the Silk Road through the lens of cultural exchange. Both from this region, the installation encourages visitors to reflect, surrounded by the smells, isolated instrumental sounds, textiles, bright shapes, and colors of Southwest Asia and North Africa, or Swana. An intersection of the past and the current moment reinvents a history of dysphoria by way of colonization and violent media representation. This rephrased understanding of the past invited other artists from the region to reconnect with diverse and vivid beauty. So in the transient language of binary code, I'd like to say 0110100 01101000 11000001 100 1011101110111011. And that means thank you. So without further ado, here is Andrew Demirjian and Dahlia.
First, Sam is going to introduce Dahlia, and then we will, without further ado.
Can I just say that was super beautiful? That was amazing. Thank you so much, Lindy.
All right. So Dahlia is she is an artist, but she's also a writer. She does a lot of short stories and installations and paintings and sculptures, all kinds of things, really. But her work has deals with a lot of the same themes of displacement, of connection between the ephemeral and the physical, but it has a very sort of bright and playful energy to it, which is it's for lack of a better word, fun. And she has, but that doesn't mean that it's not important, and that doesn't mean that it isn't appreciated by the art community. She's got a number of accolades, including the Joan Mitchell Foundation, the Edward Albee Foundation, the Women's Studio Foundation, and more. And she's been exhibited in a lot of different places, like the Newark Museum, the Zimmerli Museum, and the Johnson & Johnson Corporation. She's something of an educator herself, her current occupation being as a professor of humanities. I would like to thank her for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. That was really great. And
I could have done better, but I didn't have much time. I had I had to move into a new space, and yeah.
I understand.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam and Lindy. That was really terrific.
Thank you.
Great. And that 0 and 1s was just
so smart.
Really great. So thank you all for coming. We're so happy to be here in this way with you, talking about our work. And that was a really nice introduction to the way we work independently. And I think you'll see some of those ideas are super present in the way that we collaborate together. And so today we're going to talk mostly about collaborations, although some offshoots into our independent stuff. And that collaboration has been going on for about 19 years. We think next year might be the 20th year of our collaboration. And then in preparing this talk, we started to think about what is it about those projects that connects them? What makes them, if we looked at them through a lens of history, what is the arc or the linear, the threads that they sort of, that emerge or that we follow? And so we kind of broke it down into 3 areas: site, participation, and language.
Right. And the first, so when we're talking about site, we're really kind of interested collectively looking at creating immersive environments that emphasize the body in the space, creating a catalyst for consciousness, a catalyst for exchange.
Yeah, and then also in terms of that, the site, we're thinking about sensory experiences, sensory environments. So smells, colors, sounds, and also the space's effect on perception and the way it suggests behavior and even aspects of psychology.
Right. So there's this kind of a symbiotic flow between the space and the psyche in a way. And the other kind of thing that's really important that you'll see is consistent in our projects is participation with multiple groups that are kind of joining us. It's not something that we just do by ourselves, but these are projects that we kind of collaborate on with groups of people to make them be fully realized. So some of the pieces, like the one behind us here that we'll be talking about in a little bit. Sorry, we keep going in and out of the screen. We're trying to keep that consistent. So some can be experienced in solitary ways or also can be experienced in groups.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is the spaces that we build together have a modular aspect to them. They are able to be moved and changed depending on people's behaviors and the way that they choose to engage. And oftentimes those behaviors, I think we're really sensitive about having people perform a certain way in an artwork. So the behaviors that people are doing are familiar. They feel sort of comfortable. We're all too aware of like the self-consciousness that art sometimes makes the viewer feel. And so in thinking about how we want people to engage with the project, we want it to feel natural and that it's something that's familiar to the body. Like, and we'll see some examples of this through like camping or having coffee or lounging or just relaxing.
Mm-hmm. Right. So another key element of incorporating participation is we love working with chants and chance encounters, and we use constraint systems as part of our engagement with people, as well as this theme of exchange of ideas, exchange of music, and language.
And playful, like almost
Yeah.
like there's an element of game to it. There's like an element of game or playfulness. I'm going to move over
Yeah,
to.
let's see if this is a little better.
Okay, try that. And then the third area that really brings our work together, that is a really strong aspect of our individual work, is language, and how we use language, choosing language, editing language, and then the sources of those language, whether it's found or provided or generated by us or rearranged for new meaning. So language is also a frame of engagement that we use.
So with that kind of brief introduction to some of the kind of key themes that we're working with, we'd love to start to show you some projects that we've been working on. We're gonna, this is really fun for us because we don't get a chance to talk about our collaborative work together as often as we'd like. And it was amazing to kind of go between 19 years worth of work together. Yeah. And so we'll shoot between 2001 and 2020. But we'll start with the most recent project. Dahlia, if you could talk about that, I'll get it set up.
Yeah, so the most recent project that we did was a fully immersive installation in Washington, D.C. at a gallery called Transformer. What we wanted to do there, I mean, this is an idea that was sort of brewing for a while, but what we wanted to work on there was to create a rest stop for the future based on the past. So it was inspired by a Silk Road caravanserai. We've both done a bunch of travel and sort of research into these stops along the Silk Road where travelers from different paths would meet each other on their journey, and they would interact and they would exchange information. It was like a hotel or like a coffee shop where, you know, up in mountain passes. And so that was the idea. But the other thing about that kind of space was the aesthetics of the space was really striking to us.
Yeah.
So imagine, you know, this, I mean, just, it kind of got inspired. We were on a trip in Armenia and we were having coffee on someone's porch, and there were carpets on the wall, and there were carpets draped over the furniture, and there were cushions on the floor, and the sun was kind of coming through the window. And it was this exquisite, like magical moment. And we thought, oh God, this is amazing. Let's think about recreating this in a way that looks forward. And so one other aspect of this is that Washington, D.C. is, you know, we think about this Northeast corridor and what, you know, all these big cities along the way. And we thought about that as a sort of stand-in for the Silk Road. And what would it be like if we could create a rest stop along that Silk Road? So this is a kind of an overhead installation shot of the entire space. It's a small, like, jewel box gallery with super, super high ceilings in a sort of busy neighborhood. And the intent was to fully cover the space top to bottom with texture and pattern and color
and smells and sound. And so that's here's a view as if you kind of just walked in the door, kind of the opposite view here. And there's different sections. We were thinking about creating these different segments or locations within
zones.
Yeah, kind of zones of activity, if you will, for the piece.
Yeah, like, and we imagine these zones as places where people would interact. They would spend time, they would just sort of hang out, they would move a cushion around. Remember the modular aspect? They could sort of rearrange the way that they were sitting in the space and have these sort of organic exchanges and interactions, or in some cases in this space, be really solitary and meditative and just sort of focusing on themselves. So it had these different ways that you could engage with the space.
And so people could be in these cushions and just kind of having listening to the music, and really, and then just in front of that, there's a table and cushions, and we had worked it out with the gallery to serve coffee every Thursday at a particular time. And so it was a really kind of a set of like rituals that would take place in a place for conversation, was a key idea that we were working with.
Yeah. Good. So this is not something we would normally show during an artist talk, but we just kind of wanted to show you the origin point. Like, so, you know, we had this image of we had this idea in our head and this image of the gallery, which was just, you know, a floor plan with measurements on it. And we really wanted to think about how can, and, you know, we're not in DC. We went back and forth a few times, but just the planning of this was really intense to think about fully covering the space, every surface of the space to be covered, and then to create those zones, which we actually had names for, like a lounge for longing, or a place for four-way eye contact, or a construction for chance encounters. So this was the origin point that then eventually got us to this.
Right.
All the textiles, all the fabric, all the wallpaper and the sculptural objects we made over the course of, I'm going to guess, 6 or 7 months of sort of design, and the shapes and I guess it's the shapes. The color palette is really made in a more contemporary way, but the shapes are pulling from traditional Oriental, in quotes, right? Oriental Ottoman rugs, textiles, the Chintamani symbol.
Which one's the Chintamani symbol, in case people aren't familiar?
The Chintamani is these 3 circles that are put together. You could see it on the cushions, and you can see it on the pillow with the orange circle that has 3 dots, and then like these 2 wave forms. That is I mean, it has different names, but basically it's called the Chintamani, and it's an interesting symbol because it appears in Kurdish design, Syrian textile. It goes all the way as far to India. It's in Armenian stuff. It's in Ottoman Empire textiles. And so this is one of those exchanges that we thought, oh, all these different populations, these different civilizations, quote, but yet there's like a language of visual culture that's being exchanged. There's, of course, a language of food that's being exchanged. There's a language of song and music being exchanged, but also the visual is being exchanged. And we wanted to sort of bring that up into a way that we're exchanging with it now.
Exactly. And one of the things that also kind of started to launch this idea for us was reading about the coffee houses in Ottoman era, you know, which is now Turkey, basically, during the Ottoman era. And one of the things that I found fascinating was this kind of game that the ashiks would play, and these are traveling minstrels, basically. And so the traveling minstrels would have these riddle games where they would have a wager where one person would come up with a riddle, and then all the other players would try to solve that riddle. And they were all kind of wagering. And then after a week of having this sealed riddle that's on the wall, they would reveal it. And of course, they're playing their songs in all sorts of different languages, like Dahlia was saying, Kurdish and Turkish and Armenian. And it sounded like such a compelling space for exchange and games and exchange of both ideas, language, and sounds that I found really kind of compelling in multiple languages.
Yes, and the one thing I will say is that part of the thing that strikes us about that free-flowing exchange of ideas and culture is that area of the world is one of the most policed in the sense of borders right now. And the sort of rise of nationalism within these different places. You know, there's been a war that was just going on in Armenia and Azerbaijan. The tensions for the Kurds, who are being sort of pushed out of everywhere they are. Yeah. That kind of intensity that we're seeing now, while it might have existed in some form in the past, there was always this porousness that seems to have disappeared. So there was a little bit of lament for that. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the speakers here. The blue shaped sculptures with the black balls on top are actually speakers that we made.
Right. And so this is, we worked together on a kind of, to fill the space. There's 4 speakers that are, that have sounds kind of revolving in a 360-degree kind of sonic, spatialized way here in this setting. And they're drawing from just like Dahlia is drawing from the Chintamani in the visual design, I was kind of working with these folk instruments from the kind of Ottoman era, but extrapolating and expanding them in different unexpected weird ways, like taking a saz, which is S-A-Z, this kind of elongated guitar-like instrument, and slowing down just a saz note in front, like an infinite saz, and then having that play like a typical drum beat, but you're not hearing the drum beat, you're only hearing the resonating kind of sound of the saz. And these types of sounds that are very kind of experimental, but using folk instruments, are floating all around you, and they'll kind of float in for a few minutes and then dissipate. And then a new type of sound will come in and fill the air. And we were really trying to kind of make space in a way that was really different and kind of induced a kind of meditation.
Yeah. Do we have an example of the sound?
No? I don't have a sample of that sound ready to go.
Yeah, there are videos of that online if you want to hear the sound. There's two other aspects of the installation we want to talk about before we move on. One of them is this, would be like the left wall of the gallery. It was a zone that we called Souvenirs for the Future. And in this area, we wanted a more direct collaboration with artists who identify as Swana artists, whether diasporan or current. So there's artists here of Kurdish descent, Syrian, Iranian, Armenian, Moroccan. Did I get it all? Turkish?
Yeah.
I think I got it all. And so the idea there was to, think about if we were to have these meetups, these encounters, if I accidentally ran into Saryan Barzani, who's a Kurdish artist, what would we exchange? What gift would we give each other? And so they sent these items in, sight unseen. It was totally open up to the artist, and they're displayed in this Souvenirs from the Future wall. And what was interesting about this collaboration, you never know what's going to be the result of a collaboration. So what was fascinating to us was how many of the artists, without any kind of prompt, repurposed materials in some way
Right.
that brings this idea of past and present together. So for example, the hat is a vintage Kurdish cap that then has been modified with beads that are contemporary. And then Suzanne Batu uses, again, some kind of vintage textile. The artist in the middle, Linda Ganjian, that's a beautiful construction of old manuscripts that have been cut up and sort of rearranged in this almost industrial steampunk kind of weird mosaic. And it kind of is this beautiful thing. And then the last one I'll say there is that Negar Arkami, who created this box that's on the lower side of the screen to the right, it's a fragment of a carpet, but it's actually a light up box that when she installs a bunch of them together, that like Dance Revolution thing, but you're on a Persian carpet, but it's all sort of modified in a contemporary way. So that's one aspect of that wall.
Right. So there was this participation with a great group of artists on this wall. And as we turn to the right here, we also had a kind of sonic collaboration with another group of artists, and this is a section of the installation that's called Poetry for Alpha Waves. And one of the things, I get a lot of my ideas from reading all sorts of different materials, and this was one. It was an article that I was reading about how when we are prostrate, in other words, like kneeling to pray with our head on the ground, we release these alpha waves in our head. It just makes us feel really good. It's like child pose if you do yoga. And regardless of what, in across so many different religions within Buddhism and in the Muslim religions, and it's something that was fascinating to me, that just the physical aspect of
getting down
and just releasing the day's kind of, stuff that alone was something that brought you to a more kind of heightened state. And so we thought this would be a really interesting area. We're interested in working with the body in space. And so what we did here, what you're seeing is a hand painted electrical, it's using this very kind of cool paint that's the yellow circle at the center here. that is actually being used as a trigger. And so if there's any motion above that, it will trigger a whispered poem to you. And the collaboration here was working with a bunch of terrific artists from Egypt and Iran and all over the Southwest Asia and North Africa to contribute and suggest a poem that someone might hear in this prostrate state. And so let me play you one of those. And so it featured both Dahlia and I reading. I know my love for you is strange. One day it will become a story passed down through generations of women. I'll be just a speck in the void then, twinkling star-like. Every time my grandmother tells her granddaughter the story of the lover who etched a charm into her skin in the shape of a house, its windows flung open, its entrance furnished with dewdrop grass. Even if her beloved wanted to step inside, he wouldn't notice the charm, turning his hands into two blossoming palm trees. Every time he nears the windows, trying to draw them closed. Charms by Rasha Amran. So you get the idea of what that was like. And so that's what this person is doing here. And one of the fun things about having these participatory spaces, you never know how people are going to use them. And so this person came to visit when the gallery was open in July. And instead of kneeling down, face down, she spaced out for like possibly a half hour and listened to all of the poems.
It was great.
And it was really beautiful. And she just had, and then she started to write herself in one of the cushions. And it was such a great way, like your hope as an artist to see people really engage with your space in a way like that.
Yeah. And I want to say that, so the show opened before the day, it was the show was scheduled to open the day after the entire East Coast basically shut down. So it was this really crazy situation where you could only see it from the outside. But then we were able to extend it and it was able to be open. And when people came, we made special masks, which is what you see her wearing on the ground there. Masks that there were a couple of different variations that matched the installation. And something funny, there's always these surprise outcomes. So we intended this space to be a communal space where multiple people are inside engaging in different ways. And what ended up happening because of the restrictions of people coming in at the same time was it turned into more of a solitary and meditative space, which we couldn't have imagined and wouldn't have imagined, but it actually had this like really kind of beautiful, profound effect as a way to think about the duration, the remainder of the show when it was open.
Right. And so, I didn't realize this, Dahlia, but we go from from the pandemic to 9/11.
Oh gosh, yes. Well, we're disaster artists,
both of these projects actually had delayed openings. We're going to jump right now to Miami in 2001. And this was an amazing, this is a terrific gallery called Locust Projects that is still in existence, and they do amazing work. It's a huge gallery, and the idea for this exhibition was the whole thing. This is when reality TV was really, it's super popular, but it's the Big Brother type show was really popular. And they created an exhibition where the entire thing was on surveillance camera we were all locked into the gallery for 48 hours. Yeah. And then the opening happened after that 48-hour time limit.
Yeah, so we were literally locked in the gallery. I mean, when I think about it now, I think like, oh, that's so dangerous. There could have been a fire. But we were locked in the gallery. We did have an emergency number if we had to. Locked in the gallery with a bunch of other artists, everyone doing their projects for the 48-hour period. And then it was open to the public on like a Sunday night or whatever night we opened. But yeah, so it was supposed to be in September. And then of course, September 11th happened, then it got delayed. But regardless, the project went on. I think it was in December.
Maybe December or November, October at some point.
So in thinking about this artificial situation of reality TV, we also wanted to create a kind of artificial situation here of camping. We thought about the lockdown and this idea of like camping out in a gallery being turned literally into a camping experience. And So all of the activities that we were doing here, and again, we'll talk about someone that was a prompt-based participatory activity, participatory for us in the sense that there was a chance deck of cards that we would pick from and do the activities like, go on a hike in the woods or listen to the sound of the rain, things that you would experience in nature, but we were experiencing them in this tent with artificial turf.
Yeah, kind of, and kind of in the order of whatever came up. And we had basically like a deck of cards with prompts on them, and we'd pick up the card and then respond to that. And that's what you're seeing on the wall here. And so over the 48 hours, we set up the tent. There's a video and audio that would plays inside the tent that's super cheesy music and nature films. And on the right-hand side, we were responding to the prompts here. And the idea is once the exhibition opened, those prompts would then be completed by people that come to visit.
Right. So this is some of the response. I can't remember every single one, but I mean, clearly one had to do with like sticking your hand in some kind of mud, and then there's a bottle of off, and then there's sleeping, and like there's the ramen cup from creating your campfire meal and games. So that's that. And then I think the next one also has some kind of right. And then there were like these, there were inside those tubes were scents that would replicate nature. So you could like go and whiff the smell of pine trees or like, some other kind of scent that was, of course, everything's artificial, but sort of correlated to the camping experience.
I can't believe we were using scent in 2001 and then using scent in 2020.
Yeah.
That's, these are connections we didn't realize at the time. And so here's the opening night. Just one of the images from the opening.
Yeah,
night.
so people could come and see the sort of aftermath of our 2-day camping experience and then choose to participate in the activities themselves and continue the sort of documentation that was growing on the wall there.
Right.
It was fun. It was, it was fun. Wasn't it?
It was really, it was so much fun.
We treated ourselves to like this fancy hotel in Miami the night after the show, just because like we were like, oh, we're sleeping on a concrete floor with artificial turf. It's going to be terrible.
It's artist fancy, which was maybe like not like
artist fancy,
not like billionaire fancy.
No. Like, I mean, it was a hotel with a bed and a shower, so like that was fancy for us then. But what was so crazy was like the hotel was so noisy that we actually preferred sleeping in the tent in the gallery, and we kind of missed being out of that space weirdly.
It was funny.
Yeah.
So the next piece that we would like to talk about is this. It was a TV show that we kind of created. So we saw how in Which Yesterday Is Tomorrow, we're kind of creating a space that sets up relationships for people to participate in. And this was a kind of precursor to that in a way. And what it was actually a TV show that was kind of based on these types of French TV shows here like from the 70s. And so you can see, there's a stack of books there on the table.
This show is about, it's like literary critics talking to Charles Bukowski. It's like a whole show, and it lasts about an hour and a half. And it's just talking theoretically about like literature, the role of literature, things we do not see on our television channels here.
And so we were kind of inspired by the total vast gap between, the different types of media productions that we see and the kinds of things that we see. And so we wanted to apply some of these ideas to the art world, but in a way, this piece was like a kind of a critique of the language that's been forming around the art world, and it's kind of how it's become kind of bloated and super kind of self-referential. And we wanted to kind of poke holes in this by saying we're going to bring artists together and talk about anything but art.
Yeah. I mean, it was, it's also, this is at the height of like, the idea of marketing yourself as brand, the idea that art is a profitable and viable career. Like it's so repulsive in some way. And so we were kind of thinking about how can we frame artists in a totally different and kind of irreverent way.
Exactly. And we were incorporating chants. So this is a TV show, and I'll show you an excerpt in just a sec. It's a TV show that would bring in these chants elements. We might have a few prompts that we asked people to bring in And then we would begin a discussion. No one knew who was going to be next to them. And
But they're all artists. So
yeah.
our participatory group here were other artists that were in our geographic area.
So let's take a quick look at this video. This is Awkward Stack of Books. And what was the place where we did this? It was
at the Flux Factory in Long Island City, Queens.
Okay. And this is 2015. And let me just lower the audio a little bit. Okay. One thing I should say, this is not your typical television show with
Yes.
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 no.
Yes.
No.
No.
No. Yes.
I want to thank you all for coming. Our guests today, Rachel Stevens, Nicola Y, Matthew Fisher.
Interesting stuff. Also exciting. You almost want to talk about art more, except we will not. That's where the art talk stops.
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No. No.
Yes.
Judging is the American
Yeah, right. Oh, are you kidding?
Do you have that energy? Would people be interested?
Yeah.
Is it partly too because maybe you feel better about yourself? But
Right.
what is the
It's a
pleasure?
spectacle.
What is it about the conflicts that suck you in?
Why is it interesting?
Who decided what's a weed and what's not a weed?
Yeah.
Why not be interested in the whole scope of the human experience?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, are they more unpredictable?
How does it weigh against, say, like real soap opera that's on TV?
Am I doing this right?
Why is the Greek so much better than the regular?
Is there another one?
Which is boxers or briefs?
Could I be doing this differently?
Am I going to be able to handle this for the next 25 years?
Is it almost like a
Shitty.
literary kind of thing?
What about that art reality TV show?
How do I reinvigorate that energy?
Yeah, it
is
is
it truly
spectacle.
spectacle?
But do men talk about that with one another?
No.
What about weeds? What show do you binge watch?
Don't we ask that question every few days?
What about the questions they brought in?
Maybe it's just a tourism. Maybe it's easy tourism for us, like from your couch.
What's the next milestone?
Am I doing this right?
Can I do this for the next blank?
Yes.
year?
Yeah.
Yes.
What is in your bag? Do you have, like, if I opened your bag right now, what would I find?
Want me to go get it?
inside? Yeah, you know, go get it. We'll start with Matthew, but go grab yours.
Pause it there.
It's going to be really pretentious.
So you get the general kind of idea of that show.
And I think the other thing that's going on there are that there's an element of chance, there's an element of game. It's edited in a non-linear way, which also kind of changes up our understanding of a regular television show. Like it doesn't really make sense the way it's edited intentionally.
Yeah, let me talk about that
Yeah.
for 2 seconds, because what I think is, just in case it wasn't clear, what we were doing, it's like you took a TV talk show and you thought of it as a database and you put it into a spreadsheet and you categorized the columns and rows and you said,
Questions.
these are all the questions that were asked during this conversation. These are all of the this is all of the laughing that happened. This is what is in your bag. And so it's kind of applying categories as a system to analyze a television show conversation in a totally different kind of way.
Mhm.
And so that's the kind of thing we were exploring, to kind of look at language and the shared language, but from a different perspective.
Yeah. We'll go through some other projects kind of quickly now, talking about, I wanted to show this one because this was also an early project. This was an artist's book. And this idea of like book form and language and poetry is something that I think is really important to both of our work and then the way we collaborate. So the idea, this was a book that also had a DVD in it.
Yeah,
that was
2-channel DVD.
Yeah, super high tech at the time.
Very much so, yeah.
That was, you know, an edition of, I don't know, 100 or something, 150. But the parts of this project that are very connected to us, besides the format of the book and the video, are that they were engaging with the population of a place through exchange. And so this project, and the one we'll just show some images afterwards of Yerevan, Armenia, it was all based on conversations with people about their city. There were two sites that were undergoing intense sort of self-reflection and redefining themselves after the collapse of the Soviet Union, thinking about what is our identity. Literally, names of streets would change. Within, you know, in a week, you'd have a different name of a street, and the street that you used to know as Lenin something, you know, was that your memory is based on is now called Neptune.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of, that was an interesting thing for us, this place under construction or in transition.
Yeah, so we received a grant from the ArtsLink organization to create these projects that looked at the kind of psychological and the physical, the kind of relationship between space and psychology in these places of rapid economic and political transition.
Yeah.
So it had been about 10 years or so since these countries had kind of transitioned from a more socialist-based framework to, you know, capitalism run amok. And then, and so we were kind of having these personal conversations with, in Gdansk, it was all artists, and in Yerevan, it was a wider spectrum of people.
Yeah, so we'll just kind of go through these images quickly and show you. So this is some of the images from the book, and then the next image is from some of the video. It's stills from the video where you can see we're asking people about their sensory experiences, which is another way that we sort of engage, right? Because, I mean, engaging with the public is I thought we could do a whole lecture on that. Like, how do you be respectful and mindful and not, you know, sort of take and be an extractor? And so it comes from spending a long time with people and really sort of, you know, getting to this place where you can have these casual conversations and where they feel like they're participating and you're not just taking.
Yeah.
One of the ways that it's easiest to enter is to really talk about sense and memory. And so a lot of the information that you'll see here, and even in the Armenia ones, are about their experience through their body senses or through their personal history and their memory. So here is the taste of beer in the sea.
Here's the sound of, here the sound is very industrial. The next line is, and mixed with church bells.
Yeah.
Here is the smell of mold. And so once again, these tapping into the sensory experience of place and space to kind of bring out the kind of resonances of that play between the psychology and place. Here is a society that moves in a secret way. So this project we would hang out with, you know, a dozen people over, you know, 2 weeks before we started to really do the main interviews and begin working on the project. And
right. And so, you know, part of that, you know, build up or, you know, was talking, like going to do studio visits with artists or having dinners or inviting people over. And we would learn about people's music. And so a lot of the things that you hear in this video, besides their voices, are their creations. So it's their work. There's a bunch of different musicians and experimental artists that we worked with who provide the soundtrack and some aspects of the visuals to this project. It was a really great experience for us. And we've maintained friendships with people that we made in Gdansk in Poland. And then also the next one is in Yerevan. This was an early project as well.
From 2002. From
2002, right?
This is 2004, I think, is when it finally got released. But we were in Poland in 2003.
Yeah. And then again, very much based on a similar experience of spending time, building trust, creating a mutual respect for what people do, their work, and then asking them if they want to engage in this way. That again, we enter through the sensory questions, and then about memory.
It's really interesting now looking back that there's a lot of interest in, I'm a fellow in the Open Documentary Lab at MIT, and they've just did a kind of multi-year long study in co-creation. And so I would highly recommend, if you're interested in these kinds of practices, to check out this freely available material that they've put together. It's a report on co-creation, but this is stuff that we've been kind of playing with for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to shift to a different project entirely, but of course, one that has similar ideas, this is called Conceptual Art Camp. It was a free day camp that occurred in the summer of 2007 in an unused retail shop, these sort of empty storefronts in Asbury Park, New Jersey. It was modeled after a traditional day camp where it had all kinds of camp activities like a campfire and bird watching and nature walks. But of course, it was made inside this concrete block space with no windows. Yeah. And we can go through some of it as well. I mean, talk to someone near you in animal sound. So one of the ideas here was that, it was an art camp, but it was based on conceptual art. So all of the experiences and the activities that a participant or a camper would do were rooted in the ideas of conceptual art, which usually has a very intense, standoffish kind of or intellectual aspect to it. And we really wanted to think about democratizing that process and totally believed that multiple people can engage with this. It doesn't have to be this remote thing if we think about it in a welcoming and inviting experience. Right.
And so we're kind of often critiquing these silos between high and low, what's high art and what's low art, what's a macaroni kind of artwork on a paper plate, and what is Ankawara's, amazing pieces of text art
in a museum.
A museum. And so we would do these kind of macaroni-based conceptual art pieces that, for instance, as one type. And then here's another kind of what we.
Yes, then I wanted to show.
We had a slide.
Yeah, we had a picture of the macaroni art, so I wanted to show that.
That's so great. Okay. So this is an example of Ankawara's famous kind of conceptual art piece where he paints a date painting based on the day it was created. And then here's our version of that where people would make
date paintings based with macaroni art, which is the traditional visual material of camp, right?
But through the conversations with, we're kind of unpacking the same impetus for why would someone want to document these kind of mundane daily experiences. Oh, it's like another day kind of thing. And to have it use these kind of fun kind of ways of engaging with art as an entry point into like deeper conversations about life.
Yes. And so just I wanted to go back for this. And so to show here, like some of the activities that you would do is bird watch. And around the gallery, there were like these names of birds, and you could use the binoculars to look at them. And then some kind of mirror displacements based on Robert Smithson's work. And then of course the sing along around the virtual campfire.
But yes, but we were, just coming up with our own types of songs and not using like hokey campfire songs, and just coming up with things that happened to us that day, and using, trying to kind of make poetry not seem so highfalutin, but like more of like a casual everyday experience.
Yeah. And then we can go, and then people could take their picture at camp with a scenic background of their choice, which was of course just a text-based work. But it was, this project was really interesting because it was supposed to be for 2 weeks, I think, and it was wildly popular. And so the art center that helped us sort of acquire the space and, realize the project asked us to stay on longer. And I feel like it was one of the most feel-good projects we've ever done. Like, people loved it, and they would go and tell their friends, and then their friends would come, and then they would bring their mother. And it was just one of those projects that you just felt really, really connected to.
And what was so kind of interesting about, we love taking art out of the gallery and putting it into these odd spaces. And so this was this kind of makeshift gallery that was right on the boardwalk. So just around the corner. And so you could go get your kind of like ice cream, hot dog, and conceptual art. And there was no fee for it. And it was a real kind of, and people could just stumble in and have a conversation.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think we wanted to talk a little bit just before we wrap it up and open it up to questions about, we wanted to show 2 examples of our individual work.
And we wanted to kind of just say that it's sometimes there's this kind of bleed through between one and the other, and that there's this kind of practical aspect of the art making process where we are often enlisted in the other person's projects.
Yes, and by that, Andy, means like, help me carry this tarp out to a weird field, and like, here, hold my camera bag while I go up and down this like abandoned diving board.
Exactly. And so there's endless amounts of hilarious kind of things that happen, but there's this, each project that we kind of do individually kind of is informed by the other person's kind of input often. And we thought it might be fun do you want to show these, or should we show the 50?
How are we doing with time? We can maybe show a little bit of a tug of war.
Yeah, let's show it. I think it'll be okay. We'll show like just 2 minutes. And so this is a piece that Dahlia created that's a participatory artwork called Ideological Tug of War. And let me just get the volume level down here.
Right. So this was also one of those things that was based with, created with a group of people. I was asked by Austin Peay University to come and do an art project, and I didn't want to just go there and drop something off and then leave. It seemed weird. So I worked for a few months with the students via Skype in a couple of different classes, and we came up with this game, which was to play tug of war, but to play based on ideologies and ideological differences. It was a really eye-opening experience, because when we think about the categories that they came up with, I would have never come up with those categories because I'm not an 18-year-old, 19-year-old person living in Tennessee in the South. Mm-hmm. And so the scoreboard uses a kind of NCAA, what is that called? Like a grid.
Yeah, the kind of
Final Four like kind of grid.
March Madness grid.
Yeah. And it's an evolving poem that gets written by the winners of each match. And we'll just show a little bit of the video.
No. Thief versus nothingness. Sleep versus kittens, round 2. I know 3. I'm so nervous.
What's the secret? Yeah.
Lower the weight and then just pull.
Team Logic.
Pony.
Yeah. What's that?
Modus Pony.
2 ponies. Somebody took a catnap.
I'm gonna take my catnap now.
I still love it.
If it's possible to make nothingness proud, I think we did.
See the,
everyone down. Goodbye.
oh, that's excellent.
And so each of the teams played for their belief system. And then at the end, there was a final round, which was faith versus logic. So you can see some of the boards, some of the categories here. So faith versus state, remember where we are in the South, money versus passion, science versus art, theory versus practice, work versus sleep, and of course the ever important puppies versus kittens. That's how we started. As the game progressed, it started to get weirder. Sleep versus kittens, art versus nothingness, which is a beautiful example, faith versus money. And again, it got to faith and logic as the last 2. And that was a really, really deep question, because it's a religious area. and these kids are in college. And so there's this internal battle that just naturally sort of played out by sheer strength on the field, and logic ended up being the winner.
And the camera person was pretty good there too.
Yes, so this is one of the ways that we collaborate. That was all, filmed by Andrew Demirjian.
I happened to be doing an artist project there that was not nearly as good as that one. That was called, oh well, but so this is a fun example of one that that we participated in together. This is one of my pieces, but my work is very collaborative, and so this is a public performance out on the beach last year in 2019. It's called Our Portal is Open, and it's a 8-channel soundtrack that's distributed across 8 boom boxes and with a drummer. So it's a composition for a drummer and 8 boom boxes. And maybe so worked with a choreographer here. So, but this is a great example of Dahlia's contribution here. Is this wanted to kind of give it some structure, and so Dahlia suggested this red carpet in the middle of the to put the drums, and that was really kind of a beautiful way to solve so many of the problems we were kind of facing for structuring, and the outfits and even the wristbands.
Yeah.
And so even our kind of non-collaborative things are very collaborative.
Yeah, I mean, when you can just let it play for a little bit, while the practical aspects of being a partner in any kind of collaboration is that you have meals, you have walks, you have day-to-day experiences, and of course you talk about the regular things like laundry, but you also talk about art, so your ideas end up shaping each other. I love this.
Yeah, I think this is on my website, and so. Forward a little bit. One of the things that I really liked here, is moving sound all around people's bodies and creating these kind of intimate oral kind of exchanges with people, and kind of so they're hearing things all over the place that are kind of integrated but different, and so everyone kind of experienced the project in a different way. So we'd like to finish with one last piece, which draws on the internet in a kind of funny way. And this is a video poem that we created in 2019. It's called 50-Year Accumulation, 2-Day Sale. Do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. I mean, it's really about, there's many ways to talk about it. One, I can talk about it in an art way and tell you that it's about material accumulation, late stage capitalism, the end of life. And then there's another way that I can say that it's stuff from garage sales that is posted online. And so there was something about the visual, the aesthetics of the way that these items were presented and the language that was used to describe them that resonated with both of us. And we wanted to think about how do you capture them and take them out of that context of the internet garage sale and put them into a poem.
Right. So just as quickly, if you're not deep into this world of estates, online estate sales, what people do is they hire these companies. Once someone has passed away, they hire a company. If a child just can't deal with all of the accumulated stuff that people have acquired, they hire a company and they basically run through every room, taking these slapdash photos and then labeling them with some kind of text. And I was so drawn to the vernacular photography of these people who do this as a professional business, and then the kind of just the quick functional language that they ended up choosing to name the things that they're seeing. And this is a person's life.
Yeah. And that's what I was drawn to that. Like, I was really moved by it. Was every specific sale had an arc of a story that was sad. You would see like someone's wedding pictures and their fancy dress shoes from 1950, and then you would see like a walker.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that the lens of the photographer in this, they don't care. Everything, they just see a dollar sign. I can get $1 for the walker. I can get $5 for the shoes. So an entire life has been flattened into a monetary exchange. So there's so many deep concepts going on there that I think, you know, people are just looking to buy, but we're resonating deeply with us. And we thought we have to do something with this.
So all the text that you're going to hear us speak is from the websites, from the labeling that they were used to describe a photo, and all the photos you're going to see are just straight from the website. So this is a poem that we made from these websites here that you'll see. I'll just kind of jump forward a little bit.
Shoes, mirror, lifestyle cycle, walker,
blender,
scaffolding,
molding, everyday dishes,
party dresses,
decorative pieces,
outside vases,
most ties,
most clothes, most contents, most contents, most contents, most. Large clock,
detail,
punching bag,
handbags,
brown pants, lamp, fan,
saw,
pipes,
phones,
canes, broiler, commode, craftsman,
the
lace
back,
top, back of sofa,
close-up sofa,
close-up of wood on living room tables,
antique Chippendale break front detail,
details of dinette set,
metal wall art,
metal sculpture wall art,
18th century art,
vintage
signed
art, awesome art, nuts
holder
and bolts,
planter,
desk
washer
and
and
chair,
dryer, handbags
skulls and cards,
purses,
soda
courier
and coffee
knives,
table, lots of levels
brooms,
and brick
commercial and
diners,
small,
Tiffany and
Lennox
Company
salt mill
18
and
karat
pepper
starfish
grinder.
earrings.
Stop it before the balls. So you get a flavor for that. Okay, any final thoughts, Dahlia?
No, I mean, I think, you know, it's interesting. It's been an interesting time for me to reflect on this when we were putting this together, to see the similarities and the overlapping of ideas, but also some of the differences, like the one that we just saw. But yeah, that's really, you know, yeah, no big statement on mine. Well, I guess I would say that, you know, as artists, we work in such an individual and solitary way. We're alone a lot, but looking at this and realizing how dependent we actually are on community, whether that is to participate in a project or to activate a project or to just sort of bounce ideas off or to even, you know, I don't know, engage with, that we think of art making as this alone practice, but it's actually a really like outward facing practice in a lot of its aspects.
Right. And so, you know, and we don't really look at art as a kind of commercial end. It's, I mean, sometimes if we sell things, that's great, but that's not really the kind of source of our income and existence. And so to me, it's important to, if it's not about a commercial thing, it really should be fun. And so by having these kind of participatory in collaborative settings, it helps us kind of share experiences together that while we're kind of pursuing and thinking, you know, to us, making art is this dialogue about philosophy and living and our kind of relationship between psychology and space. So charting those things out. So we can maybe take calls.
I think we'll shift to questions now and comments.
Share.
We'd love to talk.
First, I'm gonna like applaud for the 68 people. That's so great to see you and to see the work. I just want to encourage people to look up both of your websites, because what I see is how much of your individual experience as artists come together and how it complements in this work, but you also are really material artists and sound artists and have a lot of technological and just serious practices that are alone practices as well as these collective ones. And to think about how we do this kind of preparation before we set out, like it's not just whimsy that you're going out, it's fun. There's been years and years of thinking about these concepts, thinking about the visual, thinking about the audio, thinking about text, you know, and that you then bring that to the collaborative experience. So please look them up separately and see how we work with the things around us, our senses, to come together and complement. So if you all would, I've got a hand up, excellent. So I'm gonna start there, and also the Q&A, we've got that started. Okay, Jace, will you go ahead and talk?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Hi, Jace.
Hi. I really loved your presentation, and I've always had kind of a fascination with these sort of like communal projects, and not necessarily like making the art myself, but like creating spaces for other people to make art in this really communal way. But oftentimes I feel like I don't know like who to reach out to as sort of like an unestablished artist myself. And I'm wondering how you started that in your like earlier careers.
It's a great question.
Yeah, so it is a really great question. It's one of the hardest questions, I think. The immediate group of people around you, which are your friends or your peers, like if you're in a class at school, you would ask them and sort of think about that. And if it can grow from there and get exponentially larger if you wanted to, or you could just start with that group, because while you know each other, they are sort of strangers and they can experience a project as a new person. The other way, when I think about some of the earlier projects that we did, we did them through arts organizations or through a grant of some kind. So it did have this kind of like stamp of authenticity. We weren't just we were just standing on the street asking people in some ways at some points, and it was weird. But because we could say like, oh, we're working at the Vajnia Center for Art. Yeah, it's sort of it relaxed people's shoulders a little bit from just being approached by a stranger. Yeah,
and also those institutions kind of make arrangements for you to meet certain people, and they reach out to their communities to connect you to people that might be interested. And so they'll, in some way, it changes over time. They'll reach out to the people that are part of their arts community and say, hey, we have these artists that are going to be coming out in the month of July. Do you want to meet with them and talk about and possibly participate in a project? So that there's a little bit of institutional support. So there's a research component that you would need to do to see what are the kinds of spaces that are open to these kind of more experimental forms of art that don't necessarily have you're hanging a painting on the wall kind of thing. And so and if you're not seeing them, make them. You know, that there's so many of these places that just, they get started by people being fed up with the lack of opportunities that are available. But part of what you can do in a institutional setting like the one you're in is to see if you can create exhibitions within with that, you know, at Evergreen, or even, you know, improvise with these times that we have in the pandemic to take these odd places and turn them into unexpected encounters that can be projects that you document that then you can take to places in Seattle or places in different cities, Portland.
Yeah, that's I think something really important is to just think about, you know, one thing does lead to another thing. And so, you know, just try to get something done with the people around you, try to make something and have some kind of documentation, some experience, and have some reflection on it. And from there, the other thing comes. But you know, yeah, people I think are pretty willing and open to collaborate more than we think they are. The hardest part is just kind of asking.
Yeah. And you know, you might have people that tell you no, and just, you know, ask someone else. And, but, you know, you do the research and ask strategically, you know, you know, talk to places that you just got to be part of a community. It's really, it's so difficult these days, where you can't just hang out in a gallery like you used to, you know, where you'd go to visit, you know, a gallery and you'd be a regular there. So those are some ideas. I see that Alethea has a question, and she's asking, can you speak to the role of delight or joy in your most recent installation? And I think that's also an amazing question.
Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, I think when you were just saying something about it being fun, like, you know, no one goes into art because they love torture. I mean, you know, I mean, there's something like really joyful and fun. I mean, if you think about the first time you saw art and got moved by art, or whether that, you know, you heard a song, you know, and you were sort of moved by the song, these are feelings of joy and the sublime and this kind of bliss that are, you know, I think in some way we're chasing for the rest of our lives in every little interaction that we can find. And so I think part of it is when we're making, like, you know, it's when we were playing some of those videos and we were still laughing at the video 8 years later or whatever. I think that, you know, if it's fun making it, it's fun seeing it. And so one of the things that we enjoy thinking about when we're making work is it fun for us? Because that translates, that idea of delight or joy does translate into the viewer's experience.
You know, in making this particular piece, there were, you know, for me, I experienced joy in a way that I don't really get to often in a work. Basically, in the 2 days we had been working nonstop on this project for months and months and months, and then 2 days before the installation opened, it got delayed, postponed. But we wanted to finish it and just set it up, and you never know what's going to happen, so we just kind of finished it. And those times where once it was done, to be able to sit in those cushions and hear the music as it was intended to be was a real joyous, beautiful, as well as sad. But
yeah, it was
beautiful. You know, it was just great to be able to enjoy the space as it was intended to myself. And that was something that you often don't, you're so, you know, as an artist, wrapped up in the details of things. Because we didn't have to jump right into an opening, we had this moment where it was just like, wow, this kind of came out nice.
You
know, you were kind of got to experience it like a person off the street.
I think that, you know, but part of it is that just in terms of that recent installation, some of the things that so I just want to say that installation also happened to be weirdly successful in terms of sales for, you know, like, this is just an aside. Like, we did not expect that at all, but somehow people wanted, I don't know if it was because of the pandemic and people were locked down and thinking about being in their house in a different way, but weirdly lots of things sold. But anyway, not everything sold. And so we came home with these objects when the show was done, and we ended up putting them up around our house, which we never do. If you come over, we don't have any of our own artwork up in our house. We don't, but for some reason, those objects we did put up because they do bring you that kind of feeling of joy. Maybe that's what you were talking about, like feeling it. Yeah. Great. Maybe there's something else, Shaw, is there?
I'm looking.
Lauren.
Here we go. Here's a question for Dahlia.
Yeah.
Looking through your website, I saw that you often use flags. What do they represent, or what role do they play in your work?
Yeah, well, flags is another issue, another area that we could have both talked about, because we both use flags in our work. But yeah, so a lot of my work has to do with mapping space and connecting the psychological and the physical. And so part of the process of making the work is kind of like the work of a cartographer, where you're kind of exploring and noting and marking. And so the idea of making a flag and using a flag as a marker to name is so loaded and so complex. And that's how the idea of the flags came to sort of be part of paintings, but then also become three-dimensional as objects in installation. Flags are also like a really beautiful marriage of language and or intended language and visual symbols. And so that became very comfortable for me to work with in terms of like what I wanted to do as an artist. I use a lot of flags that have text on them, but I also do work with invented or created flags, and then have done other projects where, like with maritime flags that have their meaning system, and I remix those as, poems.
But it gets, and what's interesting is it's this idea of labeling and this interest in like, how do you categorize a thing? Like you're claiming a space with that flag in a similar way to like the way that people are like labeling an item in that last video that we saw. There's this kind of interesting, the interest in how something is kind of labeled, and that I think is interesting about it.
Yeah, and also there's like something very complicated about this idea of people labeling territory. It's so like, it's so male and it's so like colonizer, that there's something, I wanted to bring something different to it, like a brown woman labeling and marking, and not labeling and marking in this kind of object or product kind of way, or mind kind of way, but more something ephemeral and psychological that doesn't normally get named, like a feeling or an experience.
Shaw, any other questions on your end?
I am not seeing, but sometimes it takes a minute.
Okay.
I have another, and I'm not sure, it feels very general as a question, but I think about both of you also working, not only interacting like with the community, but really interacting with popular culture, like media, or like the 70s talk shows, that these intellectual talk shows. So I'm interested, like, I think, and some of it, like there is a lot of delight in your work, but it's also, there is also really serious stuff, like the ideological tug of war. It's very metaphoric for some pretty serious stuff, even like the 50-year accumulation 2-day sale, right? These are kind of profound things. So yeah, so maybe talk about how closely tied and how interested you are in what's happening right now with, and really differently, like Andy, you're doing so much work around kind of digital world and new media. And then Dahlia, you've always been interested in, like comics and, whatever's going on in popular culture. So yeah, if you would talk about how that is very central.
Yeah.
Well, sure. I'm working on a project right now at Nokia Bell Labs, which has this kind of rich history of supporting artists and creating these art and technology pieces. If you look up experiments in art and technology, you'll see pieces by Robert Rauschenberg and many things like that. Anyhow, it's continuing on now. And what I'm working with right now is this idea of artificial curiosity, which is a kind of branch of artificial intelligence, and it's a type of reward system for reinforcement learning. And it's a new project for me because it's dealing with narrative, but it's also dealing with a lot. It's dealing with a lot of the same kinds of things that you're seeing here. This idea of it, but in this new case, it's how it's playing with how a machine might see space and how it might label it, but it starts to kind of go off course. And so it's kind of experimenting with new forms of technology that have kind of implications for how we're classified in a way.
Yeah, it's also about consciousness and self-reflection,
right,
from a machine's point of view.
Right.
So that's the part I think is also really important. Yeah. And then I've been working on, so the pandemic has been really weird for me. I mean, we had this show and I had another solo show. All of them had this sort of, everything for everyone has been a very unsteady ground kind of experience in terms of everything. And that definitely has permeated my studio space and studio work. And my painting practice has shrunk to like small paintings during this time, which is an interesting thing. Just I don't know how to explain that. Maybe in a couple of years, I'll be able to look back and say why. But what I have been working on is a graphic novel, which sort of goes back to my early interest in comics, which was really how I got into making art. Was I loved to read comics and make comics. And that was kind of the path to using language and image as part of my art practice. But I've been making a graphic novel, writing it and drawing it. And the graphic novel is about taking language lessons with a Syrian refugee that I've been doing for about 2 years. And the entire book takes place in virtual spaces online, through screens and through messages. Mm-hmm. Sounds great. I just got to do it,
No, it's great.
It's
a great project.
It's a lot, it's a funny project to be doing in this condition of quarantine, because we were just saying today, we're really, everything's getting relocked down over here. And also winter is coming at the same time. So it's like this double whammy. Last time spring was coming, so you could kind of engage with the outdoor space. Now it's like we're doubly in, and again, as artists, as many of you know, like we're good hermits. We're kind of inclined towards being a hermit to begin with. But it does make you rethink the way that you work if you never leave the space, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like our studios are built into our home environment. And so you work in a different kind of way. It's been a shift for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's here we got another question. Can you
I feel like I'm seeing
a lot of Memphis
design elements. Oh my God. Excellent.
Very intuitive.
Very good, Avery. I'm a big fan of Memphis design aesthetic, so it's nice to see it from a different perspective than in the interior design one. Not really a question, sorry, but it's, but it does bring up something that I think is interesting, is influences.
Yeah, Avery, that's actually a very astute and sharp eye. Thanks for bringing it up. I should have actually mentioned that, I think. Yeah, I've been sort of obsessed with the Memphis aesthetic for a while. There's sort of definitely an interest there. And part of what's interesting to me about that whole postmodern experiment was how referential it was to the past. So like you look at a Michael Graves and he's using these like Egyptian columns and these staggered shapes that are straight out of the historic classic world or whatever. So one of the reasons why postmodernism in terms of architecture and design is of interest to me is because it's combining all these historical eras and it's making these nods and winks at things from the past. And so aspects of this show that we just did, and I guess some of our work as well, for sure are pulling from that practice and that idea of like shapes, colors, forms from the past, and then reinventing them, juxtaposing them, and also the intensity of them, bringing that up to a in a new way for this situation.
Right. And it's so often kind of relegated to this second tier status of, it's these overlooked kind of era. I mean, it's starting to get more popular now, but the dominance of modernism
and
minimalism and to me, there's a kind of a playfulness, there's a kind of disparaging aspect of the postmodern that makes it kind of appealing in a different way.
Yeah. And then also I just want to say, like, culturally, the idea of more is more is like really comfortable for me aesthetically. Like we're, you know, we're Armenian and Egyptian, and like, you know, just all those weird tropes about the markets of the Middle East are true. Like they are overwhelming, and there is, I find great comfort in that. It's not disorienting. I miss it when I'm not there. We long for that kind of experience. And so, you know, you see that reflected, I think, in the kind of work that we make. Right. This, one of the people that, speaking of influence, is Davidsian, is an Egyptian artist who just passed away last year, a year and a half ago. And this show is, he's a person that would take us out to these different markets in Cairo, and just you start to see it through his eyes, and it's a kind of different, beautiful way of being just kind of one with the chaos of a market, and I think that's something that really, you know, this has been like decades really in the making. Yeah, you know, this piece. We just I think so too. I think that's right. Something we've been like, you know, in a weird way, like almost note taking on. Yeah. And then it kind of all came together with this last show. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. Avery, did you want to actually ask? I saw a hand up, but maybe you were happy with the written question. If you want to add something.
Okay.
Two more popped up.
Okay. In all the works you have presented, there appears to be concern with time. Good. Like the rest stop and the street names. This is excellent. Is this something that the two of you are always thinking about in your collaborative works, or just something that came up after the fact? That's a great question. And I can't believe we didn't
think about time.
You know, because it's so prevalent, and really what this place is all about is like a time out of mind place, a time to leave capitalism and this kind of rush to where every second is just kind of micromanaged, and you're trying to maximize efficiency at every point. And here we wanted to create a space where you just forget about what time is. And that was really kind of like what I was trying to get at with the talk about that stretching out of an instrument just to hear it resonating within its interior space. And that's really was something that was definitely on our mind, Anthony.
Yeah, the whole idea of like commodification of time, the exploitation of time, and also the you know, from a different lens, the fluidity of time and this blending of past and present. Those are things for sure that are really important in our work. I think individually and also collaboratively.
Even in the 50-year 2-day sale, you have this collapsing of a whole person's life into 2 days, you know, and so that play with time and that, but it's really, it's something we think about a lot in our different experiences of time.
Yeah.
Landon says, can you talk about the way in which the more playful and joyful projects or aspects of your art interconnect with the more serious pieces aspects? How might they talk to or inform each other? Well, I think for me, being where
were you going to go with that? Shall I jump in here? Okay, so he's going to go deep into thought there while he disappears from the screen there. But I would, so the more playful or joy, you know, it's funny because I have a hard time sometimes thinking, well, this is a hard question, Landon, now that we're both like thinking about it. I think we approach some of the serious things we try to approach them in a playful way and get at them so that they're more open. Like you know, some of the things about like Conceptual Art Camp we're so deeply committed to democratizing access to art. We both teach at a city university. And one of the things we see living in New York is the great divide between who has access to art and who doesn't. These are serious issues. This is like the big stuff. And, you know, I'm not a social scientist. I'm not a historian. I'm an artist. And so the only way I know how to address that issue is by making work and by making experiences that bridge that gap or that lessen that gap. You know, I will say that, you know, I mean, it's something that I think is part of our art practice, but also just, I hate to talk about teaching when we're in an artist lecture, but it is something like really intensely that I bring to my teaching as well.
The other thing I was going to say is sometimes when things are so sad that they almost become absurd and surrealistic. And I think we have a tendency, you know, I'm Armenian and you kind of grandson of 2 genocide survivors. So
yeah.
That you are always looking at this, like you're trained to look at the negative and everything. It's permeates every story, ends in like sorrow.
Yeah.
In any like Armenian folktale, and it gets to the point where then you just have to laugh at it. And so that kind of like absurdity of your conditioning, you know, is I think is a big part of it.
And I think that there's also an aspect of that is so true right now in the world. Like we are so, it just can't get any more dire in some ways. And how do we then, you know, the only way you can deal with it is to dance, right? Or to sort of write a poem or make a meal or have a glass of wine and just, you know, have a moment, like the greatest act of resistance is like having a moment of joy or something. In some ways that experience is where I think what we're feeling right now. And one of the ways that we think about it with the practice as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's like lovely. This is what this is, right? This is so joyful. And I just think that there's something interesting about these crazy Zoom things, because you keep referring to the artist talk there. There's this form of the artist talk that's very sort of professionalized and academic, and this really democratizes it. Like because I'm like itching or drinking a glass of water, like you're muted, not muted. And it just is, there's an intimacy that I appreciate. So I just thank you for bringing your lovely selves, your light, your joy, your delight to us. And welcome to winter weather. We're here.
Thank you so much. And we hope you guys, everyone stays safe and productive in a good, relaxed way, not in a crack the whip kind of way. And just have fun and connect with people and as you can.
Yeah. You tend to solve the big problems by slowing down.
Yeah.
You get to the thing that you want to, that that you really need to do, but sometimes in a way that you don't expect.
Yeah.
It's a good thing for us to remember.
It was great being here. Thanks for the thoughtful questions, and stay in touch on the socials, as they say.
Come back in person when we can, right?
We would love to. Love to.
Me too. All right. Thank you all. Thanks everyone for coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye.